Hello. Whew, it's been a day. It's been a day. Okay. I'm in my painting spot because I was painting earlier today. That makes sense, right? All right. I think this is hysterical. I'm guided back into the intestines. And I said, please, 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 is there something else? We were just there. And I heard, nope. So, although this time we are in the small intestines. That is the part that's 20 feet long after the stomach and before the large intestines, which we already had a talk on. And so besides the whole length amazement, 20 feet and all, crazy. And where does it go? Especially when you have a 8 months of a child inside of you. Where does it go? The pliability of the internal organs is astounding. Not just in pregnancy, but all sorts of things. Anyway, so the small intestines are the areas, they're like the large intestine, although majority of the absorption of your nutrients happen more so in your small intestines than anywhere else, which is why they're quite long, so that they break down as much as they can, and then they go into the more of the waste factor of the large. However, there are certain constituents of the mass that is still absorbed in the large intestine, but small intestines, and they still have that peristaltic movement, which means that they're kind of, you know, that squeeze movement effect still requires us to move in order to get that movement happening more efficiently. And there are a lot of conditions that actually happen in the small intestines that are pretty dramatic, such as celiac, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis and general colitis, and all these syndromes primarily have to do with inflammation. And I mean, then we can go into cancer. Cancer can go anywhere, right? And so it's interesting that all these things are inflammatory responses to things. And it kind of makes sense on the emotional, spiritual side. And on the physical side, it's interesting. It's almost like, really? Okay. What I heard was it's like a neighborhood, the small intestine. It's like a small neighborhood, right? And but the funny thing is, the images that keep coming up to me are like The Walking Dead, and Edward Scissorhand. Interesting, right? So if I, and I haven't pre-thought this at all, but if I go into those images, The Walking Dead, right? So that's more of the illness part, where the villi, the structures within the large, small intestines communicate to each other, hey, there's this problem, let's do something about it. And things are, you know, the interior matter is on some level eating the live parts, much like zombies. Interesting, right? Never thought of that. Anyway, The Walking Dead. So that's one serious side of it, right? More dramatic part. And so yes, and so the whatever is going on inside will be attacked by the immune system as an immune response, the white blood cells, etc. And everything will be sent in to see what it can do to break down and eradicate and or protect the living cells from being further damaged. The other side, which is the Edward Scissorhands side, not as dramatic, is because of the emotional part, it's a little bit more about, okay, containment and everything kind of looks the same, and let's keep everything the same, and it's this balance thing, and there's this like camaraderie between the neighbors, and right. And so when something strange comes in, like Edward Scissorhand, everybody's a little curious, but just kind of, engaging, but not having a problem unless something really starts happening, and then they all get worried. And then it goes back to the other side. I'm not a huge Walking Dead fan, although I do love Edward Scissorhand. And so those are kind of interesting symbolisms for the small intestines. I don't know why, but okay. We'll go with it. And so the immune response, is interesting because obviously that's what our body has to do to fight off whatever considered foreign thing is coming into its cells. The interesting part is that the body will hyperdrive the immune response and then becomes an actual syndrome like Crohn's and celiac and whatnot, especially if we don't notice that there's an excessive amount of issues going on and we just keep feeding it the same stuff, right? So that's obviously problematic. So that's that's kind of the physical stuff, the good foods. It's interesting, I was looking up on some of the syndromes, and they especially for the ulcerative colitis, which is also an inflammation, and they say stay away from fruit and vegetables and everything else. I'm like, well, hello. You have to eat good things to heal. So there's, in the medicine and nutrition, it is one of the biggest cluster that there is, because they don't study it enough, and they have way too many restrictive parameters for things. They're just, drives me nuts. One of the hardest subjects to talk about. And the theories keep changing. Eggs are good. No, eggs are bad. Egg whites are good. No, egg whites are bad. It's just like, please. So, I do hear that there are times where you need to liquefy your fruits and vegetables more often. And sometimes they need to be partially cooked, and sometimes they don't. So that I definitely think is part of it. And so a liquid diet may be more necessary. But again, if you have, if you're under the advice of a doctor, I can't tell you what to do. And you have to consider what you want to follow. Don't make anything. If you want to make any changes in your diet, don't make them radical. Make them small. Make them palpable, so that you can not just, throw the kitchen sink at this issue in a radical change, and that upsets your system even more. So just caution on that. Okay. So the other part of the small intestines are the bacterias that are eradicated when we take antibiotics, which are given away like Pez dispensers. And so the flora in the intestines is very important to keep up. There's also controversy about fermented food versus not having fermented food. Going to the yogurt as a fermented food is not the best source for acidophilus bifidus kind of things. So that's a hard one to support, because dairy in and of itself can cause much inflammation in people. So better than that is not to rely on just one thing. There are other ways of getting acidophilus and bifidus in your system, some through pills form, some through fermented food form. Just don't rely on it completely. I had one lady in my life, she was brilliant, and she would only eat sauerkraut for lunch. And she passed away unexpectedly. And I kept hearing she just fermented her intestines. Fermented them. Made them almost useless. So she wasn't getting her nutrients at all. So again, we are a society that just is hyper vigilant on repetition. And so while it's good in some ways, in food, it's horrible, and we need to stop it now. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that is better than all of this or all of that. Okay? And so that is that. Some of the vitamins and whatnot we talked in the large intestines also apply in the small. But the culture, especially, we didn't talk about the yeast, overrun of yeast, and candida and all that sort of stuff because of all the processed sugars and the sugars that we do eat in this culture. Interestingly enough, the same article who talked about reducing vegetables and fruit, which are the best things to eat, also talked about reducing soda. No, soda is gone. If you have any intestinal issues, soda's gone. It's battery acid. It's been proven to eat away at rust. Please, people, stop drinking soda. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Okay. Something good for the intestines. Flaxseed, really good for the intestines. Chamomile tea is great for general calming of everything. Slippery elm is good. Parasites is another thing we didn't really talk about. Parasites are also rampant. I see parasites in kids all the time. Parents don't know about it, but their pattern of behavior is like this. Boop, 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 boop. It's usually parasites. And why? Because they pick them up at the park. It happens. So there are lots of parasite cleanses. Just be cautious because it's not a pretty thing, so be nice to yourself. Basic ways of cleaning out parasites, wormwood pills are good that way. And if it's just general bacteria, olive leaf extract is great that way as well. So those are some general tips for the health of your small intestines. And yeah, if you find yourself being really, really erratic in your behavior, question if you didn't pick up a parasite. You know, again, you have to chew your food in order to break them down. And hey, if you travel and you go have fun, sometimes it happens. You're going to pick things up, and you need to know your body to know that something's happening. Okay? So, I think we're going to move on next to the emotional and spiritual side of things, and I will be back.